Broken. Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Stuart Hodkinson, and I'd like to welcome all of you tonight to this event, which I've called Housing After Grenfell, Safe and Secure Homes for All. Before I start with an explanation of what we're going to do and the kind of more contents of the event, just got to do a little bit of housekeeping, which obviously I've already started with the microphone warning. So we're not expecting any alarm testings tonight, so if an alarm does go off, we will be getting out in a calm way. We'll be going out the fire escape routes that will be hopefully signposted. The event is being filmed and live streamed, so if anyone does not want to appear on the live stream or in the recording, A, it's quite hard to cut you out, but B, we want to if you don't want to be in it. So could you make yourselves known? Great. If you're on Twitter, you can play around with your phone. Please put it on silent. Please represent what we're saying accurately, though. You can take photos, you can do all that kind of stuff. We must leave here at 5 to 9. Voluntarily, we'll be able to leave at 5 to 9. But if we don't leave at 5 to 9, we will not be allowed to leave voluntarily. We will be forcibly ejected. So I don't want to test that. We're also going to try to orchestrate a mass photo opportunity where we all get together behind the banner of the Save Our Homes LS26 campaign and any other banners that anyone else has got, and just show strength of force type photo, okay? So we're going to try and orchestrate that around 8:45. So again, if you don't want to be in that photo, I'm not sure why you wouldn't want to be in that photo. If you don't want to be in that photo, you know you're going to get that warning to leave before we take it. Another warning is that I'm renowned for being a very bad chair of events. I'm very bad at timekeeping. And so at some point, if you see me just really getting into the talks and not paying attention to the time, if someone could just help me with that. There is a sign-up... You what?
I was saying they should go for the mic at that point.
Go for the mic, yeah. There's a sign-up sheet for anyone who did not sign up via Eventbrite. If you want to keep in touch, what I'm planning to do with your data and the GDPR rules, I will destroy it obviously after so many years, but in between time, I'll just email you with information about any housing campaigns or meetings that happen in Leeds, all right? Any questions? I feel quite powerful here. So, without further ado, I've organised this public event tonight to mark just over 2 years since the Grenfell Tower disaster. Grenfell Tower was built in 1974. It was completed in 1974 as a 24-storey solid concrete council tower block, which was part of the wider Lancaster West estate development in North Kensington. And I'm sure we all know that during 2014 to 2016, the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea and its so-called tenant management organisation, KCTMO, contracted numerous private companies to refurbish that tower block, including Ryden. Among the main changes to Grenfell Tower was a new cladding system, which was designed to improve both the appearance of the tower block, but also to improve the thermal performance of the building so that residents were not freezing cold in the winter and boiling hot in the summer and those kinds of things which are common in many 60s and 70s tower blocks. As we'll hear tonight, that refurbishment and other works done to Grenfell Tower, which also took place several years earlier, so there were numerous little projects to do various bits of work to Grenfell Tower from 2011 as well. A lot of that work, or huge amounts of that work, was extremely controversial with the residents, who believed that the work was being done in a very shoddy and unsafe way. However, as we also now know, Ryden, the council, the TMO, actively ignored and shut down the residents' complaints. And Grenfell Action Group, or the Grenfell Action Group blog, warned prophetically that only a serious fire would hold the council and contractors to account. That serious fire happened in the early hours of the 14th of June 2017, when a fridge freezer in a flat on the 4th floor of Grenfell Tower exploded. It was initially a small fire. The fire brigade thought it had been put out, but somehow it managed to get out of the flat into the cladding and spread rapidly up the outside of the tower, whilst also re-entering the flats. And, you know, within about an hour, the whole thing was ablaze. The 72 people who were told to stay put, eventually died. So tonight, the point of the event part of the event is to honour the 72 people who died, and also to honour the thousands of people who were directly affected by that fire. It's not just hundreds of households that were affected, it's thousands and thousands of people that were affected, whether they were people who were directly or indirectly connected with the people who died or who had to be evacuated or went to hospital, but also the wider area, massive post-traumatic stress issues, the whole toxicity of the area from basically the poison that was raining down from people from that cladding and everything else that was in that tower block. But we're also here to show solidarity with the tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of people who are now living in fear for their lives because they too have flats in tower blocks, whether in the social sector or in the private sector, that are covered in highly combustible cladding. And we're not just talking about Grenfell-style cladding, we're talking about lots of different cladding systems.
Laminated timber.
Yeah, lots of different cladding systems, that some of which have not yet been tested. I went to a tall building fire safety conference this week. I was surrounded by fire engineers, professionals, people who know what they're talking about, and it was extremely unsettling experience for me because everyone there was talking about what kind of stuff is on these buildings, what happens when it burns, and you know, it's right that people are worried because if there's another Grenfell, you know, we're going to see something similar. So the only way that we can actually really show solidarity and honour people who died is to keep asking and keep learning about why this happened, to keep scrutinising the ongoing struggle for justice, and to keep thinking and acting on what all of this means for us here in Leeds. Because we have hundreds of tower blocks in Leeds, but we have obviously, you know, hundreds of thousands of homes in Leeds, and this is not just a high-rise problem. This is about decades and decades of construction, refurbishment, not just to blocks of flats. It's also to, you know, what we might regard as previously safe housing. We really probably don't have a clue about how a lot of this stuff has been built, under what kind of regulations, what kind of conditions, what kinds of monitoring. So, as part of that, I feel like I've made a small contribution to that. I've written this book. It's not about Grenfell. It's called Safe as Houses. It's got a very long title, actually, as I'm about to find out. It's called Safe as Houses, Private Greed, Political Negligence and Housing Policy After Grenfell, published by Manchester University Press. So my book focuses on the terrible and deadly consequences for people's homes and communities from 4 decades of neoliberal policies. These are the kind of policies that have been continuously reprivatising and recommodifying the provision and the consumption of housing, turning it into an ever more financialised asset, being produced and maintained in what is now a largely self-regulated and highly commercialised sector, irrespective of whether it's social, private, rent or owner occupation. So my book is trying to link Grenfell to, you know, the wider house building, regeneration industry that we've got. It's based on research into council housing regeneration schemes under the Private Finance Initiative, or PFI. Now, I haven't got time tonight to go into the history of PFI. I haven't got time tonight to go into the history of anything. But the most important thing to say about PFI is that it's a version of the system that produced the Grenfell Tower disaster. Because PFI is a system which is, at the heart, has outsourcing of pretty much everything in the sector, but it's also got unregulated and self-regulated model of doing that work at its heart as well. So even if Grenfell Tower was not refurbished under a PFI scheme, PFI is just an extreme version of what we've got everywhere. So in the book, what I tried to do is show how schemes like that are done under PFI, council regeneration schemes that we've got in Leeds, we've got in Manchester, we've got in Salford, we've got in all over London, they produce exactly the same stories. They produce all of the stories of institutional indifference, all of the stories of people finding terrible work, botched work, and no ability of residents to actually get any legal or political redress. Wherever they go, they're told, there's nothing to do with me. They just get passed around all the different contractors. A lot of this work is self-monitored. So we have a building industry that is dominated by very powerful companies who effectively regulate themselves. We have building codes, building regulations, British standards, all the systems that produce like the so-called sort of safety DNA. These are all largely run or dominated by companies that are doing the work and making the profits from it. And it wasn't always like this. So that's what I tried to talk about in the book. I tried to explain the history of how this happened. So you may have noticed as well tonight that Richard Bergen is not here. Unfortunately, Richard has been called to Parliament to give an urgent speech. So he's not going to be joining us tonight, which is a shame, but it gives us a lot more time to hear from everyone else. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask Nick Allen, who is the chair of Leeds Unison Trade Union Branch at the University of Leeds, to read a poem that he's written about Grenfell. I've known Nick for 20 years. I never thought I'd be introducing him as a poet. I didn't know it. But he is, and he's written a very powerful poem, and it's called Dante on the West Way. So Nick, if you want to come, or if you want to read it from there, so it's fine.
If I stand here and read without microphone, am I audible? A little bit louder. Okay. A couple of things to say first before I kick off with the poem. First, thank you, Stuart, for organising this. Very grateful for the opportunity. Secondly, the poem I'm going to read is in this pamphlet, which is for sale at £6 over there. For every £6 I get, £3 will go to the organisation that Stuart's giving some money to. A brief introduction to the poem. It's called Dante on the West Way because in the days before the Grenfell disaster, I had just happened to finish rereading Dante's Inferno. Watching the news reports come in on that night and the following days, I started to hear resonances, the same words, the same phrases were being used, some of which were repeating images and things that were in Inferno. So I wrote this poem. It's in the style of Inferno, it's 3-line verses, all that kind of stuff. There's even rhyming, which I don't do very often. And the other thing to say is that this poem isn't very reflective of everything else you would find in this pamphlet if you were to buy it. So don't buy the pamphlet. I woke to find myself in a dark wood, and to my left a pensive shadow stood, offered his hand and bade me stroll a while. Thus, in mute trepidation, we walked a silent mile, toward the west, toward the wrong horizon, where to our horror we saw a false sun risen. As my guide drew us ever closer to this fire, we watched a dwelling place turn catastrophic pyre and heard of hundreds trapped in this new hell. The never-ending blaze descended while burning plastics and materials rose in toxic smoke. Flames fell floating to the ground. Human beings choked. Thus was their torment doubled. We knew such light in darkness could only mean terror was loose in the night. But, I said, this is no war zone. There are no missiles overhead. Their waspish path lit by tracers straight to a child's bed. This is not Raqqa or Aleppo. He replied, nor is it accident. To call it such suggests no agency but God's, no intent implied, with no blame to be apportioned. Let's be clear. Let's be absolutely crystal about what happened here. Residents and their letters of complaint were ignored. Commons filibusterers rambled to defend landlords. All those swilling, vested, bloated interests prevailed. Attempts to make rental properties safe were derailed. He spoke of people made to cope with roaches, mould on walls, sleeping four to a bed when nights grow cold, smoke pouring from sockets when a switch was thrown, kids with asthma or TB before they were half grown. This was a choice made after thorough consultation, when some party insisted on a bonfire of regulations. Those who would cut corners, those who cried economise on health and safety need only cast their eyes to the accident and emergency or the community care centre, those places our Prime Minister is too afraid to enter. Let them see those frantic for news of missing brothers, the orphan flung from a window by a desperate mother. Let them see all this as their coffers overflow. Let them see all this and let those bastards know this was their austerity, their cherished gentrification, the craving belly never satisfied, their racist regeneration. His oration subsiding, my guide grew mournful, silent. I stood aside and wondered if his anger was full spent. He passed his hand across my eyes, conjuring a dream, and in this fantasy we, a pair of phantoms, seemed incorporeal. We passed among the pressing crowds, our faces hidden deep in hooded shrouds. We slipped past the men sent to fight the flames, through the lobby where once hung a list of names. Don't fear the heat, he whispered. It can't hurt you. Do not worry on your breathing, for we are as spirits and have not the urgent needs of those poor souls we'll see as we climb. Grim was our ascent, bearing witness to many crimes. I sobbed with a sadness that made my heart clutch. What shades are these, speaking their presence in such dolorous sighs? From each horror, my guide drew me away. I have trod this path before, though another knew the way, and while the details are all changed, the journey, it remains. We'll shortly see the criminals tormented by their gains, the usurers of emptiness, crouched on burning sands, seek protection from flames through ceaseless running of hands, along their flanks like dogs in summer, tormented by fleas. A place for the greedy, the treacherous, and the thieves, the boiling rivers of blood that lap at the eyes of those who would use violence and calumny against their neighbourhood. We climbed above the ash-dense air, where the sun is silent. We came once more to see the stars, the arching firmament. Above this black-raised tombstone, standing in memoriam to those who died in the Westway skyline crematorium. There let us weep for lives cut short. There let us mourn. Let us stand in unity with the many not to privilege born, the child and the unnamed refugee that avarice left to die. And there let us speak the killer's name, damned austerity.
Joe Delaney. Joe has lived in the North Kensington area virtually all of his life, and he moved onto the Lancaster West estate in March 2010. Since then, he's worked with the Grenfell Action Group blog and individual residents to try to ensure that they are all treated fairly by the council and the TMO, the ALMO, KCTMO. Since the Grenfell disaster, Joe has been working tirelessly to hold the local council to account and ensure that all of those affected by the disaster are treated with dignity.
If there is anything that people would like me to elaborate on, just stick your hand up and I'll take questions. I always like to play this by ear. I don't like to come and tell you what you should hear. I prefer people to, get information that they would find useful or of interest, and that you can hopefully apply yourselves in any battles that you may have with various authorities. I suppose, as Stu said, that my time on Lancaster West really began in 2010 when I moved on there. I'd played on the estate when I was younger, but I'd never thought I was going to live there. And ironically, it was because of other council shenanigans that I ended up on the estate in the first place. There was a private school that just suddenly appeared in Ladbroke Grove. Like literally overnight, this private school appeared. No one knew anything about it or anything. No planning permission was sought. When we inquired, they relied upon a 100-year-old classification for the building. Like you have different classifications, like this can serve food, this can be a pub. They relied on a 100-year-old classification for this building that was adjacent to the library to say that it was an institute of education. And that was how come they were allowed to open this school there. It had nothing to do with the fact that a couple of the councillors wanted their kids in it, and a couple more were down on the waiting list for their kids to be in it as well. I'm sure that had absolutely nothing at all to do with it. £9,000 a year it was to go there at the time. It's about 15 grand a year now. Notting Hill Preparatory School. I was having bother with them because all of a sudden there's a bloody playground outside my living room window that wasn't there the day before. And I was really making it very awkward for them. They were trying to get retrospective. All right, they had permission to use the building, but they didn't have permission for a playground. And they were trying to get retrospective planning application for their playground. So I just literally left a webcam in the window, and it recorded the noise all the time, and it would post it to YouTube. And I'll tell you what, for posh little kids, they sure can abuse you on YouTube when that was put up. I had to turn the comments off in the end. But I actually used to just keep them and then send them once a week to the teachers downstairs, who were all absolutely horrified. But in the end, it seemed that I was more hassle than I was worth, and the council suddenly offered me a transfer. Now, I'm not pregnant, I hadn't got married. There was absolutely no reason to be moving a single person, a single male person at that, who had no issues in the area, to another property, and a bigger property at that as well, because I was in a studio and they moved me to a one-bedroom. And I will admit, I was like, screw this, I can't be bothered with this fight, I'm done. And I moved down to Lancaster West, and I thought at the time, oh yeah, this is it now, I won't have any more hassles. And wasn't I wrong? From the moment I moved in, first thing that happened to me was I was out walking the dogs and the power went off outside, and I managed to walk straight into a drain and I broke a bone in my foot. So that was £12,500 out of them. I did it myself because I worked in the insurance unit at Brent. Someone else tripped in one of the other blocks. That was another £16,000 for her. Someone else, they hadn't fixed their heating. That was another £3,000 and a bit. And this started to, my reputation started to precede me. And in the end, I had bloody casework. I wasn't even a social worker. And I ended up with casework for various people around the estate and dealing with various issues. And they kept asking me to manage the estate management board, as it was known. Now, Lancaster West was unique in that it had the first ever TMO that was constituted in the whole country. It wasn't the first one that actually got up and running, but it was the first one to sort of formally be put into place. And it literally just ran the Lancaster West estate, nothing else. So K&C had two TMOs. It had Kensington and Chelsea Tenant Management Organisation, which managed everything but Lancaster West, and the EMB, which managed Lancaster West. Now, the KC TMO had absolutely everything it wanted. It had offices in the town hall. It had the resources of the town hall it could call upon. It could call upon legal, payroll, IT equipment, telephone equipment, electricity, office space, resource, staffing, you name it. Nothing was refused them. The Lancaster West Estate Management Board got nothing, absolutely nothing, and was clearly resented. It was absolutely resented by the council, who were determined to shut it down. Now, I was asked to run for president from when I moved in, and frankly, I didn't have the time and I didn't have the energy. I was looking after my dad, who was suffering from dementia, and he used to find it hilarious to phone the police if you didn't turn up immediately at his house. So that was taking up quite a bit of my time, dealing with him. And I was just looking after him full time, but I was offering lots of advice and support. At the same time, the consultation began for the Kensington, they called it the KALC project, KALC, the Kensington Academy and Leisure Centre project. Now, what they'd done in Chelsea was they'd rebuilt Chelsea College down there. And what they'd done was they'd basically knocked down the sports centre and the college, and they built one huge hybrid building that housed them both. And one thing that everyone noticed about this building was it was clearly designed in such a way that it could very quickly be modified to become residential properties. You could tell by the way that the entrances were structured and the way that the windows were structured and everything like that, and the way the internal walls and everything was structured. They could easily just put a few partitions in this, change a few doors, fiddle about with a few, electrical circuits, and boom, you've got dozens of flats instead of one large building. So it was clear to us even then what they were planning to do with that part of the college. And, this was before they'd even started on the one in the north of the borough. So obviously people were somewhat reluctant to see this happen in our part of the borough, because also there's no room in our part of the borough for anything. I mean, everything is built on top of everything already. We've got a huge A40 motorway running through the place, and literally every part of land in the area, every square inch is covered with something. That's why now when they're talking about building new flats, they're saying they're going to do what's known as backfill, which is where basically, you have a little park on your estate. Well, you don't have a park anymore. We're going to build 4 flats there, and you won't even have that little bit of green space. This is their plans now to increase housing in the borough. So, everyone was objecting to this plan at the time, and various promises were made that, we would maintain a footpath. Now, I don't know if any of you are ramblers in here. You ever tried to get a right-of-way removed from somewhere? Or have you ever heard this? It's virtually impossible to have a footpath rescinded. K&C were able to get it done, no problem at all. Literally, I don't know how they managed to do it with English Heritage, but the footpath that ran parallel to the train station was gone. One day it was there, the next day it was gone. Gone off Ordnance Survey, gone everywhere. And, we still to this day cannot work out how that was done, or who it was done by, or by what mechanism. It's just an absolute mystery. We personally think that they just tarmacked over it and were given the nod by central government, because that was the sort of influence that K&C had. They were envied and hated by other boroughs, even Tory boroughs. I've got, it might sound a bit trite, but, I know Conservatives. I have Conservative friends. I don't hold it against them. Everyone's allowed their own character flaws, as it were. But, even they, and, I know people in the London Assembly. I know MPs who are Conservative MPs. And all of them have told me, absolutely every single one of them have told me, they could not stand Kensington and Chelsea. None of them cannot work with them at all. They said they're arrogant, they're sloppy, and they're careless. And they seem to have this God-given right to rule, or so they see it. And that's why the only borough that ever really got on with them was Westminster, which of course had been neatly gerrymandered by Shirley Porter in the late 80s, early 90s, when she sold off properties in various key wards in the council in order to guarantee a Conservative majority. And the damage she did was so extensive that it's still not been able to be undone to this day. There is still a bias in that borough that the Electoral Commission openly acknowledges, and there is nothing they can do about it. She really did that good a number on the place. She was, of course, heir to the Tesco fortune, And yet when she was fined, I think it was 90 odd million pounds for what she did, she pled poverty and fled to Israel and stayed there for years and years and years, and eventually settled out of court with Westminster Council, who didn't get their 90 million, they got 13 and a bit, if memory serves. So you see, if you're going to commit a crime, go big. Go big and then run far, and you'll get away with it. So, I mean, you could see that these were sort of perfect bedfellows for each other. So they were starting to integrate their services more. You know, we had Kensington and Chelsea start to take over certain services for Westminster and vice versa. You know, they'd already worked together on the Carnival. They'd been trying for, 40-odd years by this point to get rid of Notting Hill Carnival, because they both bloody hate it. They really, really hate the Carnival. Don't like it at all. All these poor people dancing on the street. You know, no, can't have that at all. Not in our nice, genteel area. They might upset one of our garden squares. So, yeah, they're absolutely bitterly opposed to it. So, you know, they were starting to integrate their services, and they were really starting to ride roughshod over everyone. And I mean, it was one of my neighbours, his name was Gordon, he was on the estate management board, and he came to mine one day to ponce some cigarettes, as he often did. It was back when I smoked. God, I miss smoking, especially since that fire. But yeah, he came to ponce cigarettes, and he was telling me some of the stuff that was happening. And I was saying, but hang on a minute, that's illegal. I was like, I don't care what you say. They cannot be doing the procurement exercise in the way that you're describing to me. I said, because Brent got absolutely crapped on for doing not even anything near as bad as that when they were trying to set up their own mutual insurance company with a few other boroughs. And you're trying to tell me that this lot aren't even tendering work and are just dishing it out. And I honestly couldn't believe it. And I went to meetings and it was true. And so I started asking them, I was asked then by people in the tower to go to some of these meetings. And I sat down and I let them talk and I recorded everything they said on whatever phone I had at the time. And then I started asking them questions about the procurement. So I was saying, well, what process are you using for procurement? And they're like, oh, it's terribly complicated. It's, you know, it's EU procurement regulations. I was like, yeah, I'm somewhat familiar with them. Are you using the accelerated restricted process then, because you're doing this in under 28 days and you're doing it for a contract that's worth over £154,000 in British pounds sterling, which equates to roughly 170,000 euros, which is the threshold amount that you have to do where it has to be a public procurement exercise, and you can only do a 28-day or under one when it's an emergency. So what emergency is there in this? How come this score has to be up yesterday? And they didn't like these questions at all. They never actually answered any of the questions that we gave. We did try and circulate and publicise the issues that they were causing at the time as well. But it's one of these things where there just wasn't the resources or the time or the interest in local matters. I mean, you're actually luckier outside of London in that respect, that you still have a somewhat healthy local news media service. You know, in London, that's virtually gone. We're starting to get that back now with these local democracy reporters that all seem to work for the Daily Mail but are paid for by the BBC. You know, that they're really starting to do some work in our area, but up to then there was nothing. And the council would literally, on a weekly basis, threaten the local paper, the Kensington Post, and say, we're going to take you to court. If you mention any of these things that have been put out there, we will take you to court and we will sue you for them. Even though they couldn't. Legally, they can't do that. A council cannot sue you for libel or slander. And that's a case that was established in 1991, Times newspaper versus Derbyshire County Council. As I had to tell them when this was how I got involved with the Grenfell Action Group. Because Francis, who wrote the blog, came to me and said, they've sent me this letter and they're saying that they're going to sue me for some of the stuff I've written on this blog. And so I just did an email for him, and it basically said, you know, F off, if we put it politely. You can't do this. You literally cannot do this. I want to know under what mechanism you are planning to do this, Miss Borough Solicitor. And by the way, can I have your SRA regulation number, please? Because I'm going to report you to the Law Society, because what you are doing is wholly unethical, and you should know this. She didn't like that at all. Then we got a letter from, I think it was her and the head of finance there, who was basically saying that they would all right, they take my point that the council cannot sue for libel or slander, but individual officers can, and they will underwrite the costs for individual officers to do this. Now, so they're going to put front hundreds of thousands of pounds, potentially, of council taxpayers' money for individual officers to sue people for libel because they didn't like things that were being said about them in an official capacity. You know, it's not that they were saying, you know, John Smith is a bastard. It's, you know, the director of finance is a bastard. It was purely done in terms of what role they were undertaking. It wasn't against them personally. You know, they may have been shit in their job, 9 to 5, but, you know, they could have been lovely people as far as we were concerned once they went home. I don't know. We never actually saw what direction their broomsticks flew off in when they left the place every night, so we honestly don't know. And again, we reported this. We reported it to HMRC, and we said that, you know, this is a taxable benefit. Has any of this been declared? And I'm still waiting on the letter back from them. You know, if you owe them a fiver, bloody hell, they're haunting you. But it would seem that if, you know, you potentially owe them 500 grand, you're all right. You know, we'll get round to you eventually one day. So, you know, it really was David and Goliath. Then came in 2013, first issue that came was in May 2013. The account project had begun, and there were power surges, as were referred to in your poem. The power surges that hit the tower. Basically, everyone's TVs, kettles, irons, you name it, anything that was plugged in at the time literally exploded in their properties. There was that big a power surge that things were literally catching fire and smoking up and everything in everyone's property, all the way up the tower. You know, there's got to be something wrong. That doesn't happen in buildings in the UK. That doesn't happen in cartoons, for God's sake. You know, and yet it was happening in a supposedly safe building in one of the richest countries in the world, and the richest borough in one of the richest countries in the world. You know, less than half a mile away, we've got Prince William and Prince Harry in Kensington Palace. You know, the other way, we've got Simon Cowell. You know, we've got all these rich people around us. And in this tower block, all of a sudden, everyone's stuff's blowing up. So, again, I got involved. And if you go on the Grenfell Action Group blog, you'll see that there's a template letter that's on there for people to sue about this power surge issue. And if you check the properties of it, you'll see that it was written by Joe Delaney. And that was my first mistake. I didn't cover my name. So the council knew that I was involved, and they didn't like that at all. Then when it came for the elections for the Estate Management Board later that year, I was elected president. I was elected president in early December 2013. My dad passed away on the 23rd of December 2013. On the 24th of December 2013, the council served an enforcement notice on the EMB. They knew damn well what they were doing, saying that it had a week to do an improvement plan. Otherwise, it was going to be shut down under the Housing Act. So we had a week over a Christmas and New Year's period when they knew that I had to fly back to Ireland to bury my dad because he wanted to be buried in Ireland. Didn't leave a penny to do it, but yeah, that's a different story. So I was trying to get him flown back to Ireland at Christmas. I was also then having to write this improvement plan for the estate at the same time because I wasn't going to let them get away with this. You know, the TMO had been able to get away with stuff. You know, the Audit Commission had castigated the TMO for their own record keeping. With our record keeping, it was supposedly that we didn't have an up-to-date list of members, so an up-to-date list of all the residents in all the blocks. And the reason we didn't have an up-to-date list was the council wouldn't bloody give us one. So we were being penalised for something that they could have quite easily done for us and did in the case of the TMO. And we were being given a week to improve it at a time of year when people were on holiday and there was no one about. And there were literally no working days in which to do it. And I was in Ireland at the time. And so, yes, all of a sudden, the slow grinding gears of a council, you know, that takes forever to do anything, they were suddenly, you know, well slicked, well oiled and smoothly running, you know, and just absolutely barreled over us. And the EMB was shut down. And at that point, the TMO took over absolutely everything on the estate. The rest then, as they say, is history. You know, we got a really bad academy built that, you know, is apparently clad in very dangerous materials. You know, who in their right? I mean, just stop for a second. Do you remember polystyrene cups? Remember, and they've got banned now. No? Who in their right mind? I mean, I've set fire to those when I was a kid, and they burn they just burn in no time at all. Whose bright idea was it? Let's coat buildings in this stuff because it'll save a few quid on a heating bill. You know what logic went into that decision? And it just shows you, it just beggars belief that this happened. But so yeah, the academy is clad in stuff like that at the moment. We've got a sports centre which, you know, now faces a 200-foot tomb, which is just the thing that you want to look at when you're there to do exercise, or, you know, bring your kids to swim, or you want to send your other kids to school at the academy. That's all they need to see, is this huge tomb, you know, that still could have dead bodies in it for all we know, because we still don't know how far they've got with the excavations and things like that, because they're absolutely appallingly bad at keeping us up to date on everything. So we've still got those issues in the area. And then, of course, we had 14th of June 2017, 12:54 a.m, when the flat 17 on the 4th floor, the fridge in there, caught fire. As Stu said, the fire was put out. The fire brigade turned up, they had put out the fire. And now, in fairness to the resident, I'm not going to say his name, because anytime his name is said, he just gets abused again on Twitter. So I'm not going to do it. People often say that, well, how come he was packed and he was ready to get out of the place himself that night? And it's true, he did have a bag packed at the time, and the reason he had a bag packed was he was told by the fire brigade to leave his own property that night, because they said that you can't stay here because of all the smoke damage and everything, so you need to go somewhere else for tonight. But as far as everyone was concerned, that fire was out. It was when they were downstairs getting back into the fire engine that they noticed the glow outside by his kitchen window. And basically, that was at, roughly 12:54, and I went outside by 1:10, so within 16 minutes I was outside looking at it. And by then it had moved from the 4th floor corner, it had moved to the middle of the building. 1:30, it had hit the top floor, as Stu was saying, and it was spreading out along the top. And it was at that point I knew people were going to die. I genuinely thought that in my head. People are going to die in this building. Now, I get a bit odd in these sorts of situations. I get very calm. And all I was thinking at the time was, I was head of insurance and risk at Brent at the time. And all I was thinking was, right, imagine you were getting a claim for this, Joe, for a building in Brent. What would be the most devastating evidence that could be brought to you that would mean that you could not defend this claim in any way at all, and you would have to admit liability for it? And that was what I started to do. I saw that the fire engines couldn't get near the building, so I was videoing that. I saw that this cladding was raining off the building and showering the firemen below, so they couldn't get near the building, so I filmed that. I saw they couldn't get into the building because the fireman's key hadn't been wired in. And I was just taking all of these pictures, and that's why if you check on the inquiry website, you'll see that my statement has over 90-odd pieces of evidence with it, 90 exhibits, pictures and video and audio from that night, because that was all I wanted to do. I just thought, you bastards, we fucking warned you, pardon my language, but we did. We bloody warned you over and over and over, and you didn't listen. You literally didn't listen because you knew better. And now I'm going to show you who knows better, because I want you lot to go down for this. You know, and since then, of course, we've had the council that's changed. You know, that's all K&C keeps saying is they're sorry, because it's easier to say that you're sorry than it is to actually prove that you're sorry. To give you an example, there is a chap who lived in the tower. His name's Mahad Egal. He lived there with his wife and his kids, and they were evacuated that night. They were finally given a property not too long ago in Chelsea, and when they moved in, they noticed that there was cladding on the windows outside. And literally this stuff terrifies them to even look at it. They cannot literally look at it. So they asked the council, they said, what's that stuff made of? And the council said, first of all, we don't know. We don't know what it is. So hang on a minute. So you've approved these building plans since the fire for this building that's gone up now, and you don't know what that stuff is? No, we don't know what it, well, we don't know what it is, but we know it's safe. Okay. Is it like Grenfell safe, or is it safe? You know, what's it going to be here? Couldn't tell us. What's it made of? Couldn't tell you. Who authorised it? Don't know. What's it there for? Don't know. Could be there because it's a conservation area and it looks good. Could be there because it protects from rain. We honestly don't know. This is what they were telling him. And this was something that went up since the fire. And I saw an email last week. Yep. And I've got a minute left. I saw an email last week just to show you that they haven't changed. I started with telling you the story about the Grenfell Action Group blog getting sued in 2010. They sent Mahad an email last week saying that if he continued to defame the council and its officers in the way that he had been, by, you know, telling the bloody truth about this cladding and what they've been doing with it, that they were going to sue him for libel and slander. And it just shows you that they have learned absolutely nothing at all in all of that time. You know, I said at the night of the fire that they didn't care about the humanitarian disaster. What they care about is the PR disaster that they found on their doorstep, and they don't like shame, and that's one thing that I've tried to wield quite effectively since the night of the fire is shame, because that's the only way you'll get them to do anything. You embarrass them into doing it. Shame works. That's about all that does. You know, recently they didn't give a toss. I mean, the stuff with the racism comments that were made, that Emma Dent Code referred to in her parliamentary brief debate, that stuff's in the minutes of the meeting where that was discussed. It was about child refugees being housed in the borough. And one of the senior officers said at the time, well, we can't do that because if we do, you know, we'll just turn Kensington into an Islamic caliphate of London. You know, outright, outrageously racist comments like that, which are minuted and, you know, they didn't give a toss. But the minute it's mentioned in Parliament and it picks up a bit of traction in the news, all of a sudden they're all over it, you know, and they care about this stuff and everything. And it just shows you they haven't learnt a thing. They really haven't, you know. They were absolutely terrified in the immediate aftermath of the fire. They're not terrified anymore. They're back to their usual complacent, arrogant selves. You know, Kim Taylor-Smith, the deputy leader of the council, who, by the way, is deputy leader in name only. He's Dick Cheney to Elizabeth Campbell, the leader's George Bush. Because, honestly, that woman is... honestly, that woman is definitely a few sandwiches short of a picnic. She's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. In fact, you know, I doubt she'd even know where the drawer was or what a knife is. She's, you know, so there's no way that she's running the show. The only reason she was picked was she was the one who had the least amount of investments and properties that were in her name. So they had the least massaging of the register of members' interests to do when they put her in as leader. Couldn't put Taylor Smith in, or Taylor Swift as we call him, because he likes to make a fucking song and dance of absolutely everything. And he hates it. Net worth £48 million, by the way, from property developments. See? It all goes round in a big circle, K&C. So, I mean, he had the cheek to put a piece in Inside Housing 2 weeks ago saying that they were sorry for the way that they'd dealt with the housing situation. To show you how sorry they were, since then they sent Mahad that email threatening him with legal action. You know, so his wife has just had a miscarriage in the last couple of months. She lost the baby, and it's attributed to the stress that she's been feeling because of the situation that she's in, and because of the situation that her family's in. You know, in the day before the anniversary, so Thursday of last week, I got an email, and so did various other people who are still in temporary accommodation because our tenancies haven't been sorted out, threatening us about our tenancies and our temporary accommodation, and, you know, basically heavily hinting that, you know, this may come to an end now, so, you know, you better get back into that death trap that you fled that night. And, you know, the callousness to have sent that the day before the anniversary, when they did all this stuff, it just shows you they haven't learnt a thing. They haven't learnt a thing. But what really frightens me is that they're now overtly doing this stuff again. You know, at first they threw money at the problem to try and make it go away. Now they're not even bothering with that. And it really makes me think that, you know, I mean, it's ironic that your book's safe as houses, because I think in this situation, the only ones who seem to be safe as houses are them, you know, in their ivory tower. Because, you know, it seems that nothing is going to touch these people, nothing at all whatsoever. You know, the government aren't going to change any regulations, the industry aren't going to lobby for anything to be changed. The only ones who want it to be changed really are residents, and, you know, who are they? Who cares about them? You know, and that's what really, really, really concerns me. They are completely untouchable and unaccountable. And we're the ones who'll pay the price, you know. There's a line in, if anyone's seen Shrek, there's a great line in Shrek 2 with the little Lord fella, he's about that big, Lord Farquhar, and he says to these knights, he's like, some of you may die, but that is a risk I'm willing to take. You know, and that's literally the way that they look at this. You know, it's easy for them to play fast and loose with lives when it's not their ones that are on the line. You know, and that's what they're going to continue to do. And this is what we're up against, you know, and don't ever forget that. It can literally be a fight for your life, because the one place you'd expect to be safe is your home. And I can guarantee you at the moment that there's probably at least a quarter of you in here where there is something wrong with the property that you're in. You know, that could lead to something serious that could, you know, harm you or your family or people that you know. And, you know, I'm not being hyperbolic by saying that, sadly. I wish I was. You know, I wish I was as hysterical as they tried to paint me at the council. You know, who, by the way, have put me in for welfare checks a couple of times when I've pulled them up at scrutiny meetings. That's honestly the truth. They referred me to social services and said that he seems to be a bit hysterical. Maybe you should go and have a word with him. And it's the same MO that they've done. That's the same MO that they did with Ed Defan. It's the same MO that they did with Francis. And it just shows you they've learnt nothing. What they learnt in the past is that these things work. And so what they're going to do in future is do them again. And they will keep doing them again until they're told they can't. And who's going to tell them that? Thank you.
Questions? Questions basically now for about 10-15 minutes to Joe. You know, Joe's come all the way up, and I think it'd be great if anyone wants to ask him anything you want, any details of anything to do with Grenfell, the inquiry, the issues around social justice that are ongoing.
Nothing?
Yeah,
there we go. Hello.
Those electrical power surges,
Yep.
was that anything to do with the fridge blowing up?
We don't know. That's the thing. We don't know. I mean, personally, I don't think it was. I mean, Grenfell was a perfect storm of various pieces of shit hitting the fan at the same time. You know, Indesit have had problems with their white goods for at least a decade. I remember actually when I started at Brent, one of the people I worked with, she just had her kitchen remodelled and it burned down because the dodgy, I think it was a fridge or tumble dryer or something that was in there at the time, caught fire. And this is back in 2007. You know, and it's only now that we've had a recall announced. You know, so, I mean, it could have been, you know, it could have just been the fact that, you know, trading standards in this country is a bloody joke. And Indesit were allowed to literally get away with absolutely disgraceful safety record and continue to sell these extremely dodgy pieces of equipment. And I've put it on Twitter, you know, and I will say it. Indesit, you are shysters who make shite products. Come at me. I dare you. Because I'd love to see that. I'd love to see discovery for that libel trial. I really would. It's absolutely disgraceful that they get away with it, you know. At the time, Zurich Municipal were the council's insurer. Now, I know a bit about Zurich because I worked with them at Brent. And I know that their first instinct is to always say no on claims. You know, I really do wish now, it is a regret of mine, I really wish that I had pushed with people from the tower to pursue the power surges in 2013. Because I can't help but wonder, you know, what would have happened if I had done so. But, I mean, basically, the council originally offered 200 quid and wanted people to sign a waiver per household, no question. And I said to them, well, hang on a minute, if you're getting them to sign a waiver, that would imply that you think you're liable. This is me talking with my insurance hat on. I said, I would use that as an admission that you believe you're liable. So can I have a copy of those, please? And you should have seen those forms disappear. I've never seen anything disappear as quickly from in front of people. And then they upped the offer to 250, and they said basically there was no strings attached for this 250. And I said to all the people at the time, and I was like, look, each of you throw in 20 quid per house. You got 200 flats, that'll give you £4,000, and you could do you could instruct a really good barrister to take one of your cases to court and do it for under £5,000. So even if you lost, there's no costs for you. But if you win, you use that judgment to bash them on the head to do all the rest. And basically, they didn't do it, and I didn't push them, and they didn't push themselves. Everyone just wanted to get on with things, and it's what we all want in life, isn't it? We want a quiet life. I didn't want to be a campaigner. Before June, the most I did was things like that. I'd run for, chair of what was basically a glorified residents' association. And, or maybe vote. That was it. Whereas now, I've got the bloody Times newspaper following me to see where I'm going on a particular day. If I'd have told myself, if I'd have been able to go back in time now, 2 or 3 years and say, yeah, by the way, you're going to need media training. I've still not had any, because I don't want people to say that I've had media training and that I'm basically being managed. I would have thought that I was crazy. And this is what ordinary people, I really do pity now the Hillsborough families, because I've seen this with them, that you get no support whatsoever. So, to answer your question, it could have been the fridge stuff, We'll probably have to do some research on that. One of us will probably have to go and get, a qualification in electrical engineering and forensic science to bloody work it out for ourselves, because I doubt anyone else will actually tell us. But it does seem that unless you're doing it yourself, you're on your own.
Okay, I'm going to take 3 questions so we can kind of get more of them. Because I know Joe basically has got so much information in his head, as you can tell. Yes?
Yeah, hello. I'd like to ask you about your view on the article written by Andrew O'Hagan, the London Review of Books, the extended piece called The Tower.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people involved in Grenfell and the consequences of Grenfell and quite critical of that. Would you be able to give us a summary of what your thoughts are, mistakes you have made, things you may have got right as well, and so on?
Hang on. I'm going to take another one. Andy, yeah?
Just 2 is anyone who's evicted for Grenfell, and the second one is, what would be your top priority for Labour government going in terms of housing and in terms of Grenfell?
Building some. That would be the top priority. With Andrew O'Hagan's problem, it seems to me, is that he's a bit like a puppy, in that his mood and his attitude will basically be dictated by the last person he interacts with. And our bad luck was that it seems that the last person he spoke with was someone from the council. So that was the impression he left with. Because he even says it in his piece, and I'll tell you something about how shitty that guy is. Yeah, when we met, because I gave him calls and everything, and this is why I'm really surprised by what he said. I gave him literal recordings of calls that I made, because I recorded every single call from the night of the fire onwards. From the 999 call onwards, I recorded everything. I still do when I interact with them. And I gave him loads of them to show just how crap they were in the immediate aftermath. And he said to me, he's like, look, you can talk well, you know what you're on about and everything. He's like, do you ever think of running for politics? And I said, no. I absolutely have no intention of going into politics. I said, I'd watched Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister, and I could see the powers with Sir Humphrey. That's why I went into the civil service. I actually wanted to be able to do some good, rather than go and get votes. And that was why I went for civil service work, because in the time when I've done council work, councillors never told me anything to do. And they really don't. I can tell you that now from the inside. Very rarely do councillors actually dictate policy. It's basically done by the workers who are there day in, day out. That we all try to go for what's known as the common ground. So we try and pursue some policy that neither side can object to too much, so that we can actually get something bloody done. And we'll just pursue that path through the middle. And so that was what I said to him. I said I'd never be a politician. Jim Hacker was useless. Sir Humphrey was the one I always followed. And what did the bastard call me in the piece? He said, Joe Delaney is a politician. And I just thought, you little bitch. You catty little bitch. And I stand by it. And I'd say to him as well, you're a liar, and you're a cheat, and you have those calls, and you know that, and you come at me as well, get in the queue behind Intersit.
And he asked about,
And for a Labour government,
yeah.
build some houses. That would be the thing. Build some houses.